How's it going? Welcome to the channel, and today we are talking about trick decks. Now, full disclaimers out of the way, I have used some Amazon affiliate links for things like trick decks in the past. I don't have anything currently magic related linked right now, but I did want to get that disclaimer out of the way. But this is not sponsored, these are my opinions. Trick decks, I think everyone is aware of them, even laymen. So that's something to kind of consider when we enter this conversation. If you're able to convince your spectator that you're using a normal deck, if you're able to slide it in, switch it in maybe, or maybe you do it as a dedicated standalone effect. It's your one card effect around other things, then you can use trick decks for some incredible magic. So I have a list of my top 5. These are of the trick decks I've been able to own. So honorable mention, stripper deck or tapered deck, I've somehow still never owned. I need to get around to that. But there's definitely some classic staples in my list, but my top one might not be what you're expecting to see. So be sure to stick around for my number 1 spot. But at number 5, we're gonna go with the Mirage deck. I believe I learned about this because of Craig Petty, but the Mirage deck is basically like a Svengali deck, but it has RNS, I'll just say for those who know, added, so that you can actually spread the cards, show that every card is different, and then you can still force a card from a free spread or from a free dribble. And then if you want to show all the cards as being the same, you can do the dribble that does that like you would from a Svengali deck. So the classic Svengali deck, you are able to show the cards as different and then show all the cards the same based on the way you dribble. In the Mirage deck, it's simply added the feature of being able to spread as well. I think the Mirage deck is cool and I've used it for a couple things in the past, but it's at my number 5 because I haven't found myself thinking about it as often. I think it's cool for a couple niche cases, but I actually would go back to the Svengali deck just for your more general Svengali deck uses. Basically, I don't think you need the added feature that the Mirage deck has necessarily. Now, that's just my opinion, but that's kind of where I land with it. And it's also maybe one that's not as well known as the Svengali deck. So I did want to give it this shout out by giving it the number 5 spot. Mirage deck, you can do some pretty cool things with it. But okay, number 4 is in fact the Svengali deck. So as I was saying, you dribble the cards, they're all different. You can then have a card selected and that card continues to come to the top. And then wherever they cut to, there's the card. They cut in multiple places and there's the card. And then you can show that actually all the cards are in fact that card. Now, Svengali, like any classic deck, over time, I think becomes frowned upon. If, as a magician, we can start to think of these things as cliche. We've seen them 100 times, right? But then we almost think maybe our spectators have seen them 100 times. And of course, spectators can become over aware of certain tricks. And so if it's like, I've seen this before, we want to be aware of that. But I have a story to share with this deck in particular. I was out on a trip for an organization I worked for. I worked with college students and I was testing out all these cool esoteric products. I was just also a little less this was a while ago. This was several years ago now. I still had more performance to learn. And I was just trying out gimmicks at the time. I was kind of getting back into magic a little bit. I was just trying out gimmicks on people. And I tried an impression pad trick. I thought I presented it well, where I read someone's mind and figured out the name of their person. But that was it. It was a trick with one hit. It was a mentalism trick. And that was it. And it was just like, whatever. But they got approached by a street magician while we were out on this trip, and he literally just did the Svengali deck. Blew their minds. Several magic moments. They didn't know how he was doing it or what he was doing. And even in your mind, if you're like, oh, well, it's a trick deck because, somehow all of these cards are the same card now, it's like they still didn't understand how he was doing it. And so the theory behind that is fascinating to me, but watching that hit huge, the Svengali deck, where my cool esoteric mentalism did not hit, was a really humbling moment for me and a really huge learning moment for me to realize, yes, I can still pursue things that make me passionate when it comes to magic as a hobby. As I always reference, this is the hobbyist channel, so whether you're a professional or a hobbyist, it's important that you're enjoying the magic you share with people. That's my opinion. But at the same time, you want your audience to enjoy the magic. Absolutely. And so it's very much important to pay attention to what do audiences enjoy. And so the Svengali deck is a great pick for that. I've enjoyed playing around with it. I have not used it in professional work, but that one anecdote alone places this in that fourth spot because I've seen how well it can be used. There's also a magic shop guy who went viral just demoing the Svengali deck. And so it's kind of like SpongeBalls in that regard. Is it cliche? Maybe, but does it still work? Yes. And so we can lean towards the elitism, which is maybe a derogatory term for the more positive way to put that is innovation, right? We want to lean toward innovation, yes. But the classics are classics for a reason. So there's value to that too. So what are your thoughts on that? Kind of the innovation versus doing what's worked. Would love to know your thoughts. But that's number 4 for the Svengali deck. Number 3 is a rising card deck. Now, I used to see these advertised a lot from Illusionist. Whenever Illusionist would make a custom deck, in fact, I think they would also release a rising card deck version. And I don't know what it is in the industry, if it's just because so many other methods with borrowed decks or with unaltered decks have come about, whether it's ITRs, IET, that both I'm sure existed before this type of gimmick and other innovations have come after. Whatever it is, I just feel like this has fallen out of the conversation in a way that other gimmick decks don't seem to have fallen out. So I really like the rising card deck, actually for the very reasons that other people might not like it. So look at that. The rising card deck, that is self-contained, right? It's not examinable, but let's say you had 2 selections or up to 4, however many you want, so long as you're not boring people by the end of that. And it has its own, idiosyncrasies, but it's self-contained. So even though it's not examinable, if you switch that in or you place it in your show correctly, or if it's just an EDC, you can do it. So the gimmick takes up, I would say, maybe a third of your deck of cards. Let me check here, actually. Yeah, I'd say maybe a third of your deck of cards, maybe a little more. And so that means the rest of the cards are completely normal. And so you can do some card routines. Like let's say you put a nice, ambitious card routine together. You just work around your gimmick, and then your finale is this beautiful telekinetic moment. You can put the box in people's hands. If I'm not wrong, I think I've seen David Blaine use a rising card deck because you can place it in people's hands. And I'm not really worried about the examinability, especially if you have them take the card out themselves, whatever it may be. Now, again, are there other solutions where the deck is left normal? Absolutely. Like I said, there's IET solutions, but then they come with their own cons. You can't necessarily put the deck in people's hands. You can't necessarily have that freedom. So whenever something's self-contained, you get those cons of non-examinability, probably, but you get the pros of just letting it do its thing for the most part. And it's a telekinesis effect, or PK as we like to call it. And PK effects are just cool, right? I mean, like once you've shown someone something moving on its own, you've kind of hit that other level. All right, so what is going to be at the number 2 spot? Of course, that is going to be your invisible deck. Now, if you're new to Magic, no, I don't mean an invisible deck literally where the deck turns invisible. There are tricks like that, but that's not what this is. That name is not the original name. That name came from a presentation of this gimmick deck where you present yourself in a little bit of you can make it kind of funny. Where like, here, I've got an invisible deck. Do you have a good imagination? Okay, you shuffle the invisible deck, right? So it's like play along. And then they turn an imaginary card over in the invisible deck. And then you say, okay, now we're going to make the deck real. Or you take a real deck out of your pocket, whatever you want to present it as. But the idea is now that this is going to mirror that invisible deck, whatever it may be. And then you go in and that card, any named card out of all 52, is turned over in the deck. So this is a classic. I've done this several times. I've seen many magicians do it. I've seen them do it casual, street magic. I've seen it done live on a grand stage. A conference presenter, magician, did this as one of his opening tricks. And so people still use this to this day. I have weirdly found myself moving away from it over time, but I still have it at number 2 kind of for that mindset of impact. So why isn't it my number 1 anymore? Because I will say there was a time in life where I would have put it at number 1. I think this is great for a beginner. It is in that more mental zone, but still high impact, and it can be very quick, name a card, boom. But it is a gimmick deck that you have to switch out of, but it's not so similar to any of the other decks we're going to talk about in this list, in that it doesn't have use cases outside that one moment. Unless I haven't checked this out, but like Craig Petty has come up with his project where he talks through more uses for the invisible deck, and there's other things like that too. But at face value, it's kind of a one and done trick deck. When I was talking about Rising a second ago, you can fit other tricks into the Rising deck. Svengali, you can build out routines with the Svengali deck. The deck we're going to talk about in a minute, you can do all your other tricks with that deck. So I think there's just a limitation to the invisible deck. And I'm also learning about ways that you can have any card named and you have a solution for that are not the invisible deck. I'm not quite ready to start showing this to people yet, but I've really been into indexes lately. So I have shown people Patrick Kuhn's index. I've used it on people a couple times. Daniel Madison has an index that I'm practicing with. And then I'm really interested in, there's this independent artist who released his own index called the RNS index. I'm abbreviating it there for secrecy's sake. So yeah, the invisible deck, I really feel like I cut my teeth on it in a way. It's really, really powerful. I've also seen it not hit sometimes, and that can all just come down to presentation. But I'm wondering if, similar to what I worried about with the Svengali deck, if that is really happening to the invisible deck, where people might actually just be aware of it. In fact, I'll say when I was walking out of that show, I heard someone from the audience, I'm pretty sure, exposing it to his friend. He was like, oh yeah, it was just this. And again, we're in the age of the internet. That can happen to any trick. That doesn't mean you should discredit the trick, but that's my anecdotal experience of invisible deck. So let me know what you think. Where are you at with the invisible deck? And last but not least, at my number 1 spot, unexpected hit, unexpected crowned king is in fact a marked deck of cards. I honestly stayed away from using marked decks forever. Once again, from my own anecdotal experience, I knew people who were more on the layman side of things who were aware of marked decks. The marked decks I was aware of growing up were coded marked decks as opposed to reader back marked decks. And the marked deck I'm going to recommend is in fact a reader back. The difference being a coded or a marked deck has markings that you then have to decode. So, certain things are colored in or striped, or, there's all sorts of different ways that magicians have come up with it to integrate it onto a card back. But a reader back hides actual letters and or symbols, okay? So I'm going to mention the one I have and use, and then I'm going to mention the one that I hope to get someday that I still just haven't picked up. So the one I have and use are the cohort decks. Now this is the red cohort deck. It's from Illusionist, and they actually revealed on their own channel what the markings look like. We have markings here on the corners, and they actually have the digit or the letter for the value, and then they have a letter for the suit. And I have found them to be very discreet, and also it's just about the way you use them. So I've really enjoyed this. These cards are a little thin. I wish they weren't maybe so thin, but I love the design. And they just re-released them as the Cohort Casino, and that might mean a difference in stock or finish, because apparently it's a different printing, but I haven't checked those out yet. The one I'm going to be interested into trying is the Penguin marked deck. Now, I do have a packet trick from them that uses those cards, so I have seen the markings up close, and what I worry about is that they are more apparent. At least to my eyes, they seem a little more obvious, a little more like they could be caught by a spectator, but a lot of people have sworn by them, or at least a lot of the people that are represented in the Penguin promotion, magicians that are using them, are swearing by them. And from what I've seen online, people like them. But I've seen other people too, like in the reviews, they have values and symbols rather than values and letters. So like on the cohort, a D is going to mean diamond. On the bicycle penguin mark deck, it's going to be a picture of a diamond. That's both more catchable to an audience member, in my opinion, and also actually this commenter was saying online, like potentially more difficult for you in the moment based on like how our brains are decoding information quickly. So I'm not sure, but I am still really excited to try it. Here's what I wish we had. I wish we had this style of marking on a bicycle deck, on a rider back or rider equivalent, you know, because there's maiden back, there's mandolin back. That's fine to me, right? So let me know if that exists. If you know of something more akin to this on a marked deck, that would be incredible. So that would be the perfect mix in my opinion. So if you know of something that's like a mix between this but on a bicycle deck, let me know. But what I love doing is just a simple mind reading trick with the marked deck. So that's one trick it's given me. And then I can still do all my other tricks without having to switch in another deck. So that's amazing. And then there's certain tricks that might have required a peak or a force that you don't have to do that anymore. You can just peek via the marking. I always bring up the biddle trick. That's a perfect example. You don't need to force or peek the face of the card. You just need to peek the card as it's going into the deck or as they're looking at it, and you have it. And then you can go through with your trick. Only thing is, I have a lot of tricks I do with bicycle decks, and so I've had to strategize. Either this is the only deck I'm gonna do the card tricks with, or I have to have a reason that I'm bringing another deck out. So that's why I'd love to have a bicycle option. Those are my top 5 trick decks. What did you guys think? What was your favorite, or what would your list be? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, keep enjoying your magic. Stay a hobbyist at heart. That means enjoying it. And I'll see you guys in the next video.